The hallway shook with heavy footsteps. Boots echoed against the floor. One of the soldiers let out a dry laugh. "Well, look who's here. Base Grandma just showed up." Janet pushed the mop forward without looking up. Her gray hair was tied in a simple bun. She stopped in front of the reinforced door of the Tactical Command Center. Sergeant Perez stepped closer, chest puffed out, voice too loud. "Ma'am, this is not the time for cleaning. We have an alpha-level emergency." She didn't answer, just looked through the bulletproof glass. Dozens of technicians rushed between workstations. Red screens flashed warning messages. The Aegis 7 system was offline, completely dead. "The mission's at risk," murmured a lieutenant into the phone. "We need that system back up in under 4 hours." Janet adjusted her rubber gloves. They couldn't see her tattoo right now. Her eyes scanned every detail of the room. She knew every processor, every line of code in that system, because she built it. 23 years ago. The sergeant banged on the glass. "Granny Janitor, get out of here." She walked away in silence. The mop squeaked against the floor, but her eyes kept studying, calculating, waiting. At Hawthorne Military Base, the most heavily protected underground facility on the continent, a technical collapse was underway. At that moment, Janet was pushing a cleaning cart through the hallways. No one looked at her. She wore the blue uniform of a third-party contractor. The name on her badge read, Nancy. Flawless fake documents identified her as a civilian janitor assigned to the base. What no one knew was that she was there under direct orders from the Pentagon. "Ghost Protocol," General Morrison had said during the classified video call. "Civilian infiltration, zero chain of command interference. You assess, fix it, and get out." 30 years ago, she had been part of the Marine Corps, serving as the lead engineer on the Pentagon's most highly classified project. Graduated in electrical engineering from MIT at 22, PhD in defense systems by 25, she had spent 2 decades of her life building something most thought impossible. A fully autonomous weapon system, capable of neutralizing threats before traditional radar could even detect them. During the construction of the Aegis 7 system, she had installed what she called an emergency port, a physical access point protected by a sequence only she knew, a fail-safe against catastrophic failure that no one imagined would ever be needed. It had been 23 years since she walked away from that military project, 23 years building a life far from the machines of war. But Aegis 7 still carried her signature, and it still held her secrets. Inside the main operations room, chaos was escalating. Young soldiers were typing code frantically. Screens flashed useless diagnostics. Major Williams barked out ineffective orders. "Try the secondary backup." "We already did, sir." "Then reboot the main core." No response from the system. Janet paused in front of a trash bin, pretended to empty it. In truth, she was listening to every word, every desperate attempt. They were attacking the problem from all the wrong angles, using protocols she herself had rendered obsolete years ago. Sergeant Perez appeared again, his face red with frustration. "You're still here? I told you we're in the middle of an emergency." She looked at him silently. Calm eyes, almost kind, like a patient grandmother dealing with an impatient grandson. "Just doing my job," she replied gently. Her accent was slightly heavy, perfect for the cover. "Your job is in another section. This area's restricted." A young soldier laughed. "Let her be, Sarge. Granny Janitor's not going to hack anything with that mop." Janet gave a small smile, kept cleaning, but her eyes were tracking every system failure pattern. She knew exactly what was happening. Aegis 7 wasn't broken, it was locked. A security protocol she had programmed decades ago. An anti-sabotage mechanism that kicked in when it detected unauthorized access attempts. The more they tried to force their way in, the deeper the system buried itself. Major Williams slammed his fist on the table. 3 hours and 40 minutes. If we don't fix this, we miss the operational window. Janet placed the mop back in the cart, started walking toward the exit, but stopped in front of a secondary panel, an old console no one used anymore. Her fingers brushed lightly across the metallic surface. There it was, The legacy access point, invisible to everyone, except the person who had designed it. "Ma'am," the sergeant approached again. "Don't touch anything." She pulled her hands back, gave him a polite smile. "Sorry, just cleaning." But she wasn't cleaning. She was scanning, calculating, preparing. The mission might depend on Aegis 7, but Aegis 7 still answered to only one person in the world, and that person was pushing a mop, being called Granny Janitor by soldiers who had no idea who was standing right in front of them. The situation was deteriorating fast. Janet watched from the service doorway. 3 different tech teams had already failed. The Aegis 7 system remained completely inaccessible. The main screen showed only one error message: "Access denied, Alpha Protocol." "Get the specialist from Washington," Major Williams shouted, sweat dripping down his forehead. "Someone who actually understands this damn system." Sergeant Perez walked past her, carrying emergency cables. He stopped, frowning. "You're still here? How many times do I have to tell you?" "I'm cleaning the hallways," Janet replied calmly, both hands steady on the mop. "Cleaning? Don't you see we're in the middle of a crisis?" She looked at him, and for a moment something different passed through her eyes, a subtle authority. Then it faded. "We all have our own crises," she said simply. Perez shook his head. "Great. Now we've got a philosophical Granny Janitor." Inside the main room, a technician was removing access panels. Exposed wires created a colorful web. He hooked up advanced diagnostic gear, trying one bypass after another. Nothing worked. "The system's got some kind of protection we can't break through," he reported to the major. "It's like it was programmed to reject any external interference." Janet stepped up to the observation window. She knew they were right. Aegis 7 had been designed to be impenetrable. Every brute force attempt only triggered tighter security. Like trying to crack a vault by kicking the door. They were doing it all wrong. 2 hours and 15 minutes, a voice called over the intercom. "Repeat, 2 hours and 15 minutes until critical window." Major Williams, his brow soaked and face tight with stress, yelled in frustration. "Anyone got an idea? Anything?" Tense silence. Dozens of highly trained professionals. No answers. Janet stepped back from the window, moved down the side hallway, stopped again at the old secondary console. Her fingers brushed the metallic surface. This time she pressed lightly. A small light came on. "What are you doing?" She turned. Sergeant Perez stood behind her, suspicious. "Cleaning," she said calmly. "Cleaning what?" "That's a control panel. It's dusty." Perez stepped closer, examined the console. He saw nothing special, just old circuits and outdated connectors. "Don't touch anything else, you hear me? A little old lady messing with military hardware. What if you break something?" Janet lowered her head, submissive. "Sorry." But as Perez walked away, she allowed herself the faintest smile. The light was still on. The legacy protocol had been activated. The system now recognized her presence. In the main room, someone shouted, "We've got movement! Something just changed!" Everyone rushed to the screens. For a few seconds, the error code flickered, as if the system were thinking. Then it returned to normal. "Access denied, Alpha Protocol." "False alarm," a technician muttered. But Janet knew it wasn't. It wasn't a glitch. It was acknowledgement. Aegis 7 knew she was there. It was waiting for her final authorization. She pushed the cart toward the supply closet. She needed time. She needed privacy. In an hour and 40 minutes, if no one else found a solution, she'd have to drop the cover, or let the mission fail. Behind her, the chaos continued. Desperate voices, useless attempts, the clock ticking without mercy. And the fate of the mission now rested on a 62-year-old woman who had spent the entire morning being mocked by soldiers who had no idea they were in the presence of one of the most brilliant minds in the history of military technology. 30 minutes until the critical window. The entire base was in a state of controlled panic. Technicians rushed between stations. Officers shouted conflicting orders. Major Williams was on the phone with Washington, trying to explain the unexplainable. Janet stepped out of the supply closet. She no longer carried the mop. She moved with a different purpose. Her steps were firm, shoulders straight. Something had changed in her posture. She walked directly toward the main entrance of the command center. Sergeant Perez stepped in front of her. "I've told you 1,000 times. I need to go in," she interrupted. Her voice was different now. Perez hesitated. Something in her tone threw him off. "Ma'am, 30 minutes, Janet said calmly. "After that, you lose everything." "How do you know that?" She didn't answer. She just pushed the door open and walked in. Major Williams turned, annoyed. "Who let the janitor in here?" Dr. Janet walked straight toward the main Aegis 7 console. Dozens of people stopped to stare. The situation was so absurd, no one reacted right away. "Get her out of here," a technician shouted. "This is a restricted area." She ignored him, stopped in front of the central panel. Her hands moved with surgical precision. First, she disconnected 3 specific cables, then reconnected them in a different sequence. "Somebody get her out of there," the major ordered. But before anyone could move, something happened. The main screens flickered. The error message vanished. A new interface appeared. Legacy mode activated. Awaiting primary authorization. For a moment, the room went completely silent. Janet pulled off her rubber gloves. On her forearm was a U.S. Marine Corps tattoo. No one moved. No one spoke. She placed her right palm on a biometric scanner. Green light. Identity confirmed. Dr. Janet Allen. Full access granted. The screens lit up with data. Aegis 7 came fully online. Subsystems connected. Diagnostics streamed like a waterfall. Within 15 seconds, the system was fully operational. System online mission authorized, operational window confirmed. Major Williams walked toward her slowly, his face pale. Who are you?" Janet turned to him, removed the clip from her hair. It fell around her shoulders, revealing features that looked older under the harsh light. "Dr. Janet Allen, lead architect of the Aegis project, Omega-7 clearance." She pulled a small device from her pocket, a military-grade encrypted communicator. Pressed a button. "General Morrison, this is Ghost. System restored. Mission can proceed." The general's voice echoed through the room. "Confirmed, Doctor. Excellent work. Hawthorne Base, you're speaking to the person who built your defense system." Sergeant Perez stepped back, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Doctor, I didn't know." "You weren't supposed to," she replied calmly. "That was the whole point." Major Williams stepped closer. "But why the disguise? If I came in here as Dr. Allen, you would have smothered me with protocol and pleasantries. I wouldn't have seen what was really going on. This system is too important. I had to be sure what the real issue was." She pointed to the screens. "The system wasn't broken. It was protecting itself. You triggered an anti-sabotage protocol I wrote 23 years ago. The more you pushed, the more it locked down." The young soldier who had laughed at her stepped forward, head down. "Ma'am, Doctor, sorry about the jokes." Dr. Janet gave him a warm smile. Patient, almost grandmotherly. "You called me Granny Janitor. You know what? I liked the nickname. Means the disguise worked perfectly." She slipped the rubber gloves back on. "I clean up messes, that's all." Aegis 7 continued humming. Green lights across every panel. The mission was saved. But something more important had happened in that room. 30 people had learned that competence doesn't wear a uniform, that real authority doesn't need to shout, and that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one no one notices. Dr. Janet picked up the mop she had left in the corner. "May I continue cleaning now, Major?" He smiled, for the first time in hours. "By all means, Doctor, do your job." Sergeant Perez approached. There was no arrogance in his steps now, only quiet respect. "Doctor," he said softly, "I owe you an apology." She stopped, looked him in the eye. "For what?" "For treating you like a janitor?" she said, smiling. "But I am a janitor. I clean systems. I remove faults. I organize chaos." Perez lowered his head. "I won't forget this." In the main room, the team worked with renewed focus. But the atmosphere had changed. Fewer shouts, more collaboration. Everyone seemed just a bit more aware that competence can come from anywhere. The young soldier who had laughed at her stood near the secondary console, studying the old panel she had used, trying to understand. "You won't figure it out just by staring," said Dr. Janet as she walked over. He turned, embarrassed. "Doctor, I just wanted to understand how it works." She placed her hand on the panel. "Every system has a back door, a path that bypasses all the safeguards, but only if you know where to look." "And where do you look?" "In the places everyone ignores," she said, pointing to the old console. "Outdated tech, obsolete interfaces, discontinued protocols. That's where the real secrets hide." The soldier scribbled down every word. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you were honest. You laughed at me to my face. I prefer honesty over fake politeness." Major Williams approached, his posture respectful. "Doctor, General Morrison would like a word." Dr. Janet picked up the communicator. "Standing by, General." "Outstanding work, Janet. As always." The General's voice echoed through the room. "I'll need full documentation of this protocol, for future reference." "Already done, sir. Full report will be sent within 2 hours." "And the base personnel? Your assessment?" Dr. Janet looked around. Attentive faces, people who, just 4 hours ago, had seen her as an obstacle, now waiting for her evaluation as if it were a final verdict. "Capable," she said, "but trapped by protocol. I recommend training in lateral thinking, and more diversity in technical teams. Sometimes solving a problem requires being invisible, observing without being noticed, thinking beyond the obvious. This base needs people who can see what others overlook. There's a lot of untapped talent out there." "Understood. We'll implement your recommendations." The transmission ended. Dr. Janet put the communicator away, then removed her blue uniform. Sergeant Perez walked with her to the exit. "Doctor, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why put up with the humiliation? Why not reveal your identity after the first jokes?" Dr. Janet stopped at the exit door. She looked back. The base was humming with activity, but something was different in the air. Less arrogance, more awareness. "Because humiliation is temporary," she said, "but the lesson is permanent." She smiled. "You'll never underestimate an old janitor again." She laughed softly as she said it. Perez extended his hand in a respectful handshake. "It was an honor, Doctor." She shook it, firm, confident. "The honor was mine, Sergeant." Dr. Janet left the base. She walked toward the parked car outside. In the hallways behind her, a new doctrine was quietly taking root. Competence wears no uniform. Authority doesn't need to shout. And sometimes the most important person in the room is the one nobody notices, but who has the most to teach. Dr. Janet faded into the horizon, but in that base, her lesson would remain forever. If you enjoyed this story, click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next.